We just want to know what happened and why our baby didn't come home.
A grand jury is stepping in, and every single phone is about to be downloaded. Weeks after Nolan Wells lost his life on Horn Island, his family's legal team has just revealed that key witnesses are officially refusing to cooperate with law enforcement. Let's listen directly to the attorneys and the family who just came out of a critical meeting with the DA.
Good morning. I'm Attorney Ben Crump, along with Attorney Lisa Park, Attorney Hersh, Justin Preston, and Cliff Jones. We have the honor of representing the family of Nolan Wells. We have present with us his mother and father, Christine and Elmore. We've just had an opportunity to meet with District Attorney Angel McGrath and some members of her team. We had a very respectful meeting. The thing I assume some of you may know, the thing to announce, she shared with the family that there will be a grand jury that she will turn this case over to once they have collected all the information and finished their investigation. We also agreed that we will have a mutual inspection of the cell phone with our experts and their experts. Attorney Hersh is helping lead the investigation team with former law enforcement experts who are going to help us with the cell phone download. So everybody will be able to see at the same time what the cell phone has. We also talked about trying to make sure we dot every I and cross every T. I know that we're getting about 50 calls a day to 100 calls a day from people who were there on Horn Island, people who are familiar with individuals that were there on Horn Island. And so we continue to be steadfast in trying to get to the truth of why Nolan Wells is dead. At this time, we'll have Attorney Hersh say a few words, and then Christine and Elmore will just talk about the homegoing services and celebration for Nolan, and then we'll take a few of your questions. Attorney Hersh.
Thank you. Right now, there's a lot of unanswered questions. We appreciate the district attorney meeting with us, but because of certain types of confidentiality that even the victims are not allowed to know, we did not get all the answers we want. We have an independent investigation going on that involves former law enforcement, federal agents that are going to be looking into all the different information we got. The calls are coming in and we're getting a lot of information. Some of the people that I spoke to are not talking with the law enforcement here. We're going to be trying to get them to cooperate with each other because we want to make sure the narrative, which has been put out that is false, is going to be corrected. So at this point, we just ask everybody to keep calling in if you have any information and let us know. And I personally, if we validate you're a legitimate call, we'll call you and talk to you. And I thank you all for showing up today.
And now, Christine and Elmore will just share some details of the homegoing celebration for their son.
Hello everyone. So the homegoing celebration, the funeral will be held at Center Point Church in Ocean Springs. It is going to be, visitation will be 9 to 11 and then the funeral will start after that. The plan is for the repast because again, we want to celebrate Nolan. And he would not want us to be sitting around crying and eating, and so what we're going to do is kind of have a party to celebrate him, and that'll be held at the Jackson County Fairgrounds. So we really do want to keep it for family and friends. We are going to allow media to come in as well, and lastly, I just
His teammates.
Oh, absolutely. Teammates. We've already contacted Coach Les George because we want to make sure that those guys are there. Former teammates from high school, middle school, teams that he played against. You guys are all welcome. But of course, we want to make sure that our families for sure and close friends get there. So I do want to just say for those of you, again, if you are having protests, even the day of his service, I am asking you guys to just keep it peaceful. Nolan would never want any type of violence or anything like that. He was not that kind of person. So if you guys would, again, just be peaceful. And to the community, thank you so much. Just the outpouring of love, support. We've had some local officials, Mayor Casey Vaughn from Gaucher has reached out to us. Oh my gosh, I can't even tell you. He has, it's almost been every day. He's been texting to check on us. Also, Jeffrey Hullum, thank you so much. He's been texting pretty much every day. Receiving a lot of stories from Nolan's teachers, which just warms my heart, his classmates, teammates. So again, for those of you who have donated to the GoFundMe, once again, I stress, if you are not financially able to, we're not begging for that money, okay? If you're not financially able to, we understand. We thank you for whatever you can give, but if you cannot, if you would, just keep us in your prayers. And to his friends, stay strong, and please just take care of your mental health, because I know this is a lot. It's a lot for us, and I know you guys are feeling some of that too. So thank you all.
Are there any questions? Yes.
Attorney Crump, Skyler Henry here with CBS News. The last time that you spoke in a setting like this, I know you guys were hoping to get results back from an independent autopsy. I know you mentioned that Nolan had been sent to Washington, D.C. Is there anything to share on that front?
Not at this time, but we hope soon, very soon. Obviously, we're concentrating on the funeral services, but hopefully shortly thereafter, we will be able to tell some findings of the preliminary autopsy. Still waiting on some things. And also, while we're talking about funeral services, want to thank Mr. Tyler Perry for paying for the funeral.
Absolutely.
As well as Colin Kaepernick for helping to shoulder the expense of the independent autopsy. And I thank Reverend Al for agreeing to officiate the funeral services. Yes, sir.
Aaron Gilchrist with NBC News. Mr. and Mrs. Wansley, you said from the very beginning that for you, this was really about getting some answers about what happened to your son. Do you feel like after your meeting today, you have any more clarity on what happened?
Well, it was just a meeting where she talked about the process. She didn't tell us any information about the investigation too much, because those things are, as she said, her role and what she has to do. But they still have questions, and that's not insignificant to this meeting. It's just in general. Every morning they wake up and there's a hole in their heart, and they are trying to say, what happened to my son? Obviously, they feel strongly that he would not have just stayed behind. He wouldn't have left his cell phone. And so we're trying to get to those answers.
Attorney Crump, Brian Rose, GC Wire. There's been a lot of misinformation that's been spread online, especially the pool picture that was shared by you, and you had said that... Well,
I didn't share it, I reposted it. We're reposting everything. Let's make it clear, we're reposting everything because we're trying to get people to come in and call. And so we've said from the beginning, we're in a ferocious search for the truth. And so things out there, we are trying to post, ask people, do you know something about this? Let us know. Just because we repost does not mean that we authenticate anything. Look at our social media. We have always been very careful to say this is a repost, and we almost always give declaration that that's what it is, a repost. And so we want people to continue to call about everything, videos, whatever interactions they saw. And thank God we are getting dozens of people calling every day saying, I was on Horn Island, this is what I saw, I know these individuals, this is what we know. They said, we understand the sheriff's investigation has hundreds of people calling too. And so the hope is that when this is presented to the grand jury, all relevant witnesses and evidence will be presented to them so that we can have a fair and impartial investigation into the death of Nolan Wells. We were very honest and candid with the district attorney, and she was honest and candid with us. Our lived experiences tell us that we must question everything, everybody's role, law enforcement role. That is the lived experience of us as black people in America. And we will be not honoring the ancestors' sacrifices for us if we did not be honest every chance we got when we talk to power.
Hersh mentioned the false narrative out there. Well, I've seen quite a few of those, so I was wondering if you could tell us which false narrative you're talking about so we can let people know it's not true. Was there a particular false narrative you were
There's a lot of narratives out there right now, and
There's a lot of narratives we're going to try to investigate on them.
there's a lot of narratives out there right now. I'm not going to comment on any particular one, but whenever a case this big gets in the news, people try, for whatever motivations, law enforcement or whoever, people that call in, try to set up a narrative so that people will follow the narrative. Our job is to cut through all the noise and find the truth. And the truth needs to be found by unbiased investigation, as well as unbiased lawyers and all the people that are out here, all you investigatory journalists and everyone else. We just ask that you keep an open mind until we get to the truth.
And one of the things I will say, we are trying desperately to figure it out. And we don't profess to have all the answers, but what we're trying. And so when people call and tell us this is this person, and then we get somebody saying that, no, this isn't that person, we're trying to balance it all. So we want to even be more careful ourselves to make certain that we're trying to get people to come forward. And there are a lot of people who have different perspectives. We're getting that just from the phone calls, that people who were there at the same time are saying different things. But we're going to get there. We're going to get to the truth.
So first, I just want to say my deepest condolences to you, Christine, and Elmore. Our heart hurts. I pray you can feel WLOX Spirit home. But I want to go on and ask you, Attorney Ben Crump, you say that you were talking about the process and there with the DA. Were any affidavits or possible prosecutions or criminal actions presented to her to be signed eventually? Or do we know anything right now?
And as she said, her role is confidential at this point, but so she can maintain her prosecutorial independence. Obviously, I stressed to her very strenuously to say, we want you to zealously, you and the Sheriff's Department, to zealously investigate this matter. And Christine and Elmore share their life experiences too. We know through our lived experiences, our life experiences, and she said that's not how our office operates, but we know in America, in the South, certain people are investigated differently. And we shared that with her. We didn't, ask that she understand our perspective, but we said we should mutually try to understand each other's perspectives, where we're coming from. And we agreed that we would try to do that.
Where are we at in the investigation and autopsy? We were supposed to get it back Friday.
Well, no, we like we said, we're waiting. Let the doctors do what they do. They ain't got their autopsy back neither, so we're trying to get it right. And then when we get it, we're going to share it. Yes, ma'am.
On Friday in the press conference, you said that you hear on the video Nolan saying,
yes,
my freaking phone, what are you freaking doing?
That's what a witness told us, and that's what we reported out. Then another witness had come forward and said, no, that was his voice. We have other witnesses who said there were other altercations, so as Mr. Hersh said, we're trying to go through it all and so forth. And we'll be even more careful to say this is what a witness told us in the future.
And so your team hasn't been able to look into that and confirm whether it was or was not Nolan?
No, we have audio people doing it, but we know certain people said it was him, and then certain people said it was not him.
Are you worried about the death threats and the violent kind of atmosphere on social media and how these fake videos and photos could play into that?
Oh my God, I saw a
Even
fake video.
with Nolan's friends getting death threats?
We don't want anybody's life to be in harm's way just because we're trying to get to the truth of what happened to Christine and Elmore's son. We saw fake videos about AI-generated videos of Christine, and it's just god-awful as they're grieving and trying to fight for the truth that they are also having to deal with these fake videos attacking them as they are just trying to literally bury their son next week. But we want everybody to say that we can go through this journey together for the truth. And even though we may have different viewpoints, we can all agree that everybody wants the truth, and nobody life should be threatened for seeking the truth. Nobody should be presumed accountable until we have evidence. His mother and father only want, and Christine has said it multiple times, she only wants what you would want. If this was your son, if this was your daughter, wouldn't you want desperately to get to the truth? Wouldn't you want people who were closest in proximity to what happened to be investigated and thoroughly investigated? We know that, if it was Nolan, how would he be investigated? So, one last question.
Really quickly, just curious about the dynamic that you guys have had, Christine and Elmore, with law enforcement up until this point. Have you all been able to speak with the sheriff, any of the lead investigators, since what happened last week?
So that was actually clarified in today's meeting. The DA's office wanted to take over that communications because they do have a victim advocate, which I appreciate, but of course that wasn't what she, took responsibility and accountability for. But we were not communicated with that information. So for us, like I said before, the last time we actually spoke to someone with the Sheriff's Department was last Tuesday. That was via text message that I initiated, just asking for an update. So that's the biggest thing is, I appreciate that she took accountability for saying, hey, that was actually our doing. But, we have a setup now, and so the hope is that we'll have that open lines of communication.
So you feel like this was useful today?
Attorney Hersh has a comment on that there.
Let me just say that under the law in Mississippi, a victim is entitled within, I think it's 72 hours to get an incident report and to have certain information shared. It's been more than 72 hours, and that's part of the meeting here today to start getting the incident report and all that information that we came here to collect, as well as listen to the district attorney and what she had to say.
Did you get that report?
No, not yet. We are working with them to say there need to be better communications with the clients and so forth. So the big things that we know, there's going to be a grand jury into the death of Nolan Wells, and number two, that we're going to have a mutual inspection of Nolan's cell phone. We just want to make sure everybody else's cell phone is also being downloaded. Thank you.
Really quick.
A grand jury is coming. A cell phone that everyone has been talking about for weeks is finally about to be opened by both sides at the same time. And in the middle of all of it, the family's own legal team just stood in front of a bank of cameras and did something you almost never see in a case this high profile. They walked back one of their own most quoted claims. If you've been following this case, you already know the name Nolan Wells. 18 years old, a wide receiver at Southwest Mississippi Community College, gone missing on the 4th of July after a boat trip to Horn Island, and then, days later, found dead in the water just off that same shoreline. Since then, this case has become one of the most talked about unresolved deaths in the country, not only because of what happened out on that island, but because of everything that's piled up in the weeks since. Leaked photos, competing witness accounts, theories multiplying faster than anyone can fact-check them, and a family that has been very publicly, very persistently demanding answers they still don't have. Today, there was a press conference, and I want to go through it with you carefully because there's a lot packed into it, some of it procedural, some of it deeply personal, and at least one moment in here that I think matters more than people are going to realize once it settles in. By the time we're done, you're going to know exactly what's now confirmed, what's still just a claim, what's actively being disputed, and what actually happens next in the legal process. Stick around too, because we need to talk about something the family's attorneys brought up today that I don't think has gotten nearly enough attention. AI-generated fake content that's reportedly being used to target Nolan's own mother while she is, in the middle of all of this, still trying to plan her son's funeral. Let's get into it. Before we go any further, let's back up, because I know not everyone watching has caught every earlier video on this case, and even the people who have are going to want the refresher before we get into today's material. Nolan Wells was a teenager whose death is currently the subject of an active, unresolved investigation. He'd graduated high school in Mississippi and was playing football at a community college, getting ready to head back for the season. Reportedly, he was part of a group that took a boat trip out to Horn Island, a barrier island off the Mississippi Gulf Coast. If you've never heard of it, it's the kind of place people go for exactly the reasons that now make this case so hard to piece together. It's popular for boating and camping and day trips, but it's also remote. No year-round law enforcement presence out there. Spotty cell service in a lot of areas. The only way on or off is by private or chartered boat. It's beautiful, and it's also a place where, if something goes wrong, there aren't a lot of witnesses and there isn't a lot of infrastructure to document it. At some point during that trip, Nolan died, and I want to be really clear with you here at the very top because this matters for how we talk about this case going forward. No cause of death has been officially confirmed publicly. No suspect has been named. No one has been charged with any crime. If you hear anyone, including me, including this channel, state definitively what happened to Nolan Wells, understand that at this stage, that's someone's theory. It is not a confirmed fact. What we do know is that this case has pulled in an enormous amount of public attention, and it's worth understanding why. Part of it is just the raw emotional weight, a young life cut short, a family desperately searching for answers. Part of it is the setting itself, an isolated island, a group of people, and conflicting accounts of what actually happened out there. And part of it, honestly, is the internet doing what the internet always does with an unresolved mystery, filling in the blanks with speculation, screenshots, and increasingly AI-generated content, which we're going to get into later in this video. Nolan's parents have retained a legal team that includes a well-known civil rights attorney, along with several others handling different parts of the case, one leading the family's own independent investigation. This isn't the first time this team has stood in front of cameras. They've held prior press conferences, responded to rumors as they've surfaced, and pushed back on leaked or reposted images that spread online before anyone could verify them. And today, they were back, this time right after a closed-door meeting with the District Attorney's office. That meeting is what the rest of this video is about. Let's start with the procedural stuff, because it actually matters for understanding where this case goes from here. And because I think grand jury is one of those phrases that gets thrown around constantly in true crime coverage without anyone stopping to explain what it actually means. Here's what we know. The family and their legal team sat down directly with the district attorney's office today. It was described afterward as a respectful meeting, which is worth noting because there had been real tension in prior weeks about the family feeling shut out of the process entirely. Coming out of that meeting, the DA's office confirmed that once its investigation is complete, this case will be turned over to a grand jury. So what does that actually mean? A grand jury is a group of ordinary citizens convened specifically to review evidence presented by prosecutors and then decide whether there's enough there to bring formal charges. It is not a trial. There's no defense team presenting a counter case in the room, no cross-examination the way you'd see on a courtroom drama. It's prosecutors laying out what they've got and a group of citizens deciding whether that evidence clears the bar to move forward with an indictment. And here's the part I really want you to sit with, because it's easy to hear grand jury and assume that means something has already been decided. It hasn't. The fact that this case is heading to a grand jury doesn't tell us who, if anyone, is going to be indicted. It doesn't confirm a cause of death. It doesn't confirm foul play of any kind. What it tells us is that the district attorney's office considers this serious enough to formally present to that body once the investigation wraps up. That's a real, meaningful procedural marker, but it is a marker about process, not about outcome. No timeline has been given yet for when that presentation will actually happen. The investigation still has to be completed first. Evidence still has to be finalized, and only then does this move to the grand jury stage. So if you're watching this hoping for a clean answer to "so is someone getting charged," I understand the instinct, but that's genuinely not information anyone has right now, including the family. What I'd encourage you to take from this section isn't a verdict, it's a status update. The machinery is moving. The case is progressing through the system in a way that at least suggests prosecutors are treating it with the weight this family has been asking for since the beginning. Where it lands is still an open question, and it's going to stay an open question for a while. The second concrete development out of today's meeting has to do with Nolan's cell phone. And if you've been following this case at all, you already know why that phone matters so much. Investigators have publicly asked why Nolan didn't have his phone with him when his friends returned to the mainland without him. His parents have said repeatedly that it doesn't track with who their son was, that he wasn't the kind of person who'd simply leave it behind. Whatever is or isn't on that device has become one of the central pieces of physical evidence everyone is waiting on. Here's what was announced today. That phone is going to be downloaded and inspected, and, this is the key detail, it's going to happen with experts from both sides present at the same time, not law enforcement reviewing it first and telling the family what they found afterward. A mutual, simultaneous inspection, with investigators working alongside the family's own legal team, which includes people with former law enforcement backgrounds brought in specifically for this. Why does that distinction matter? Because in cases where there's already a trust deficit between a grieving family and the agency investigating their child's death, having both sides in the room at the same time, rather than the family waiting to be told secondhand what turned up, is a meaningful step toward transparency. Regardless of what the phone actually shows once it's opened up, the process itself is different from what this family has experienced up to this point. No date has been set yet for when that inspection will actually take place, so this is again a status update rather than a resolution. But it's worth flagging as one of the more concrete outcomes of today's meeting, a specific, verifiable commitment, not just a general statement about wanting more transparency going forward. There was another detail that came out of today's meeting that I think is worth slowing down on, because it gives you a real sense of just how much attention this case has generated, not in the abstract, but in actual numbers. The attorney leading the family's independent investigation said his team is fielding somewhere between 50 and 100 calls a day, every day, from people who say they were on Horn Island around the time Nolan disappeared, or who know people who were there. Think about that volume for a second. That's not a trickle of tips coming in here and there. That's the kind of call volume you typically see in nationally prominent missing persons or homicide cases, the kind that have saturated national news for months at a time. And this case is generating that on a daily basis, weeks in. Here's the part that I think is genuinely notable, though. A lot of that volume isn't going to law enforcement. It's going specifically to the family's independent investigators. And according to the attorney, some of the people calling in are apparently only willing to talk to the family's side, not to the sheriff's department directly. That's worth sitting with. It suggests there's at least some segment of the public that has information and trusts the family's independent investigation with it more than they trust handing it directly to law enforcement in this case. Part of the effort right now, from what was described today, is trying to get those two tracks to actually talk to each other, encouraging people who've called the family's team to also cooperate with the sheriff's department so that information isn't sitting siloed in one place and inaccessible to the official investigation. There was also a mention of some of the incoming information being aimed at correcting what was called a false narrative circulating about the case. No specifics were given on what that narrative actually is, not today, and not when a reporter tried to press on it directly. And I want to be upfront with you about why I'm not going to guess at what that might mean. It would be easy to fill in that blank with whatever theory is already floating around online, but the attorneys themselves didn't do that on the record, and it wouldn't be responsible for us to do it for them. If that gets specified publicly, we'll cover it. Until then, we're not filling in the blank for you. Okay, this is the part of today's press conference that I think deserves the most careful treatment of anything we've covered so far, because what happened here is a genuine correction, and in true crime coverage, corrections almost never get the same attention that the original claim did. I want to fix that right now. Quick context for anyone who hasn't followed every prior update on this case. At an earlier press conference, the family's legal team relayed an account from a witness, someone who reportedly said they heard Nolan shouting something angry and frustrated about his phone in the moments before he went missing. That detail spread everywhere. It became one of the single most repeated, most dissected pieces of this entire case online. People built entire theories on top of it, who he might have been talking to, what his tone meant, whether it pointed toward an altercation. It became, in a lot of ways, the emotional centerpiece of how this case got talked about for weeks. Today, a reporter asked directly about that quote, and the answer this time was noticeably more careful than how that detail had been treated when it first went viral. The attorney confirmed that detail came from a single witness. Since then, a second witness has come forward disputing it, saying that's not what happened or not what was actually said. There's also acknowledgement now that there were other reported altercations that day, separate from this specific moment, and that the legal team is working with audio experts to try to actually verify whose voice was captured, if anyone's, and whether it can be confirmed as Nolan's at all. Here's the line I want you to really sit with, because I think it might be the single most important thing said in the entire press conference. Going forward, the attorney said, they're going to be more careful to frame these kinds of details explicitly as, this is what a witness told us, rather than presenting them as settled fact. I want to slow down here because this isn't just relevant to this one case. This is genuinely important for how any of us, including this channel, should be thinking about single-source claims in active investigations generally, not just this one. So, going forward, in our own coverage here, we're going to treat that quote the same way the attorneys now say they will, as a disputed claim attributed to one witness under active review, not as something Nolan is confirmed to have said. If that audio analysis ever produces a verified result, one way or the other, that's a significant update on its own, and we'll cover it as its own story when it happens. There was one more clarification in this same part of the Q&A worth flagging, because it follows the exact same pattern. You may remember a photo that circulated a while back, allegedly showing Nolan at a gathering later that night, which conflicted with the publicly known timeline of when he was last seen. It spread widely, and a lot of the online theorizing around this case has built directly on top of it. Today, the attorney clarified that his team reposted that image but never authenticated it, meaning they shared it publicly asking if anyone recognized it or had information, not confirming it as verified evidence of anything. He said their standard practice has been to clearly label reposts as reposts on their own social media, specifically so people don't mistake a request for information as a confirmed fact. Whether that distinction actually came through clearly to the public is a separate question. Based on how much theorizing has built up around that photo, the nuance pretty clearly got lost somewhere along the way. But that's the explanation on record. This next part is something that, frankly, I don't think has gotten anywhere near enough coverage relative to how serious it actually is. During the Q&A, a reporter asked the family's team directly whether they're worried about death threats and the broader hostile atmosphere that's built up around this case on social media. The answer was blunt: yes. There have been reportedly people connected to the family receiving death threats, not just the parents, but others around them as well. And then came a detail that I think needs to be stated plainly and repeated clearly because it is genuinely disturbing. AI-generated fake videos of Nolan's mother have reportedly been circulating online. I want you to actually sit with what that means for a second, rather than let it pass by as just one more bullet point in a long list of updates. This is a mother who is in the middle of literally planning her son's funeral for next week, also having to contend with fabricated video content depicting her, generated by artificial intelligence, spreading online. That is not a hypothetical harm. That is not some abstract concern about where AI misinformation might be headed someday. That is happening right now to a specific grieving parent in the middle of an active investigation into her child's death. I want to be careful here about exactly what I can and can't tell you. I haven't independently verified the content of those videos myself, and I'm not going to describe or speculate on what's in them. That's not something this channel is going to do, and frankly, it's not something any responsible channel should do. What I can tell you is that a named attorney representing the family stated this publicly on the record at a press conference. That's a credible enough sourcing standard to report that the claim exists, while being clear that we are not independently confirming or showing you the content itself. The attorney connected this to a broader point that I think is worth sitting with too. Nobody's life should be threatened for seeking truth, and nobody should be presumed guilty of anything before there's actual evidence. The point was made that the parents only want what any parent in their position would want: a thorough, honest investigation into what happened to their son. That's a pretty reasonable, almost universally relatable thing to want. And yet the environment around this case has apparently escalated all the way to death threats and fabricated AI content aimed at a grieving mother. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this particular segment, let it be this. As this case continues to generate massive public interest, which if you're watching this video, you are part of, the responsible way to engage with it is to push for real answers through real channels, not to participate in a rumor mill that has apparently already spiraled into harassment and fabricated content aimed at the people at the center of this tragedy. That's not a lecture, it's just where the facts of today's press conference actually point. Briefer update here, but an important one to track. The family commissioned an independent autopsy separate from whatever official findings may eventually come through the state. That independent autopsy was sent out of state for review, and it's reportedly being funded by a well-known public figure who stepped up to help cover costs. As of today, those results are not back yet. The attorney said they're hoping to have findings to share soon, but gave no specific date, and was clear that the immediate focus right now is the funeral, not chasing a timeline on the autopsy. I want to be disciplined here and not fill that gap in with speculation about what an eventual autopsy might show. We don't know. Nobody watching this video knows. When those results do come back, and they may not necessarily be made fully public even then, depending on how the family and their legal team choose to handle it, that's a major update on its own, and it'll get its own dedicated coverage when it happens. For now, the honest, accurate statement is simply this: the independent autopsy has not yet been completed or released. This next part is, I think, an underrated piece of today's press conference, because unlike almost everything else we've covered so far, this one isn't a matter of competing witness accounts or disputed claims. It's a statement about a specific legal entitlement and whether it was actually met. That makes it something you can go check for yourself, rather than something that comes down to who you believe. Here's the claim. Under Mississippi law, a crime victim, which under most state victims' rights statutes extends to immediate family members in a death case, is entitled to receive an incident report and certain baseline information within a specific window of time. The attorney representing the family cited that window as 72 hours. And he stated plainly that more than 72 hours have now passed and the family still has not received that incident report. I want to separate this out from everything else in this video because it deserves to stand on its own. This isn't a he said, she said situation. It's a factual question with a factual answer. Does Mississippi law require this report within 72 hours, and has that window passed without it being provided? If accurate, that represents a real procedural failure, independent of anything else going on in the broader investigation, independent of the grand jury, independent of the disputed witness quote, independent of any of it. There was some additional personal detail here too that's worth including because it fills in the human side of this. The mother said the last time anyone from the sheriff's department actually communicated with the family directly was the previous Tuesday, and that contact wasn't even initiated by the sheriff's office. She said she was the one who reached out by text message asking for an update. Following today's meeting, the district attorney's office has apparently agreed to take over as the primary point of contact for the family going forward, working through a victim advocate. The family said they appreciated that acknowledgement, but it's worth being honest about the timeline here. That acknowledgement and the plan to fix the communication gap came only after the family's legal team raised it directly in today's meeting, not proactively from law enforcement before that. So here's how I'd frame this section for you. Whatever ultimately gets determined about what happened to Nolan Wells, the separate question of whether his family received basic legally mandated information about the case in a timely manner has its own answer. And based on what was said today, that answer appears to be no, at least not within the statutory window. I want to give some space here to how the family themselves are describing all of this. Because in a case with this much procedural detail and this much noise online, it's easy to lose sight of the fact that at the center of it are two parents who still don't know what happened to their son. A reporter asked the parents directly whether today's meeting gave them any more clarity about what actually happened to Nolan. The honest answer was no, not really. The meeting was described as being more about process than substance, which tracks with everything else we've covered. The district attorney's office is limited in what it can share while the investigation is still active. What the mother did say is that every single morning they wake up with what she described as a hole in their heart, still asking the same question: what happened to my son? She repeated a detail we've heard from this family before, that they don't believe Nolan would have simply chosen to stay behind on that island, and that he wouldn't have left his phone behind either. That belief has been consistent since the very beginning of this case, and it clearly hasn't wavered. The father was also asked about the family's broader relationship with law enforcement throughout this process, and his answer touched on something bigger than just this one case. He described the family's approach, questioning every institution, every role, pushing for information rather than assuming it will be freely given, as coming out of the lived experience of black families navigating the justice system in the South. He was careful to frame this as the family's own perspective and experience, not as an accusation against any specific investigator working this case. The district attorney reportedly told the family that's not how her office operates, and both sides apparently agreed to keep trying to understand where the other is coming from. I'm not including this to editorialize on it myself. I'm including it because it's a significant, on-the-record part of how this family has explained their own posture throughout this process, and it goes a long way toward explaining why they've pushed so hard for independent investigators, an independent autopsy, and a mutual evidence review at every single step, rather than simply waiting on official channels to come to them. The second half of today's press conference shifted to something more personal: the funeral arrangements for Nolan. The mother described the service, which the family is calling a homegoing celebration, as being held at a church in their community, with visitation running for a couple of hours in the morning before the funeral service itself begins. Rather than a traditional repast afterward, the family is planning what she described as more of a celebration of life gathering at the local fairgrounds, framed explicitly around who Nolan actually was as a person. She said plainly that he wouldn't have wanted people sitting around in mourning, and that they wanted to honor that instead. The service is being officiated by a nationally known reverend, and the funeral costs are reportedly being covered by a well-known public figure, separate from the independent autopsy funding, which is coming from someone else entirely. Both of those details underline just how much outside support this family has drawn in, beyond their own community. The mother specifically mentioned wanting Nolan's teammates present, not just from his current team, but former teammates going back to middle school and high school, along with players from opposing teams he'd played against over the years. She said the family has already been in touch with one of his former coaches to help coordinate that. She also acknowledged the outpouring of community support more broadly, naming a couple of local officials who she said have been checking in on the family regularly since this all began. On the subject of any planned protests coinciding with the service, she asked directly and clearly for anyone attending or demonstrating nearby to keep things peaceful, stating plainly that violence isn't something Nolan would have wanted associated with his memory in any way. She also addressed the fundraiser that's been collecting donations for the family, making a point of clarifying that they're not pressuring anyone financially. If people are able to contribute, it's appreciated. If not, prayers and support are enough. She closed this part of her remarks with a message directed specifically at Nolan's friends, encouraging them to take care of their own mental health through this, and acknowledging that this loss extends well beyond just the immediate family. So, where does this case actually stand after today? Let's lay it out plainly, because I think it's useful to hear the concrete, verifiable state of things in one place, separate from everything else we've covered. The case is moving toward a grand jury, though no timeline has been given yet for when that presentation will actually happen. The cell phone, arguably the single most anticipated piece of evidence in this entire case, is set for a mutual, simultaneous inspection between the family's experts and law enforcement's experts, though again, no date has been announced for that yet either. The independent autopsy results are still pending, with no firm timeline beyond soon. And the district attorney's office has now taken over as the primary point of communication with the family going forward, following the acknowledged gap in reporting. At the same time, one of the most viral claims associated with this entire case, that alleged quote about the phone, is now officially disputed and under audio review, rather than being treated as confirmed fact. That's a meaningful shift. And if you've shared or discussed that detail in the past, based on earlier reporting, this is genuinely worth knowing and worth passing along to anyone you shared it with. And running underneath all of it is something that deserves ongoing attention entirely on its own: a grieving family dealing with death threats and AI-generated fake content in the middle of an already painful, already high-profile loss. That's not a footnote to this story. It's part of the story. I'll be tracking every one of these threads as they develop: the grand jury process, the cell phone inspection, the autopsy results, and any further clarification on that disputed witness account. If any one of those produces a significant update, that's going to be its own dedicated video, not buried in a general roundup, because each of those is genuinely significant enough to stand on its own. Here's what I want to leave you with. This is a case where the facts are still actively moving, including facts that were reported as settled just weeks ago and are now openly being revised by the very people who first shared them. That's not a reason to disengage from this story. It's a reason to be more careful about how we engage with it going forward. If you were on Horn Island around the time of Nolan's death, or you have information you genuinely believe is credible and specific, not a rumor, not a screenshot pulled from somewhere online, the tip lines for both the family's independent investigators and local law enforcement are linked in the description below. Please don't leave that kind of information in the comments here. It won't reach the people who actually need it, and it just adds to the noise this family has already had to deal with. If this update helped cut through some of what's circulated online, subscribe so you don't miss the next one, because there will be a next one. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next update.